Hello, I am Eva, and I'm excited to introduce the Kongming starter deck for my favorite trading card game, Grand Archive. Grand Archive is a TCG with anime-style art and Western game design. The Kongming starter deck is dropping October 11th, 2024, alongside Grand Archive's 5th booster set called Mortal Ambition, its first foray into the world of Sanguo, inspired by Romance of the Three Kingdoms and Chinese history. The Kongming starter deck comes with a standard-sized 60-card main deck and 12-card material deck. Note that it does have a 5 out of 5 star difficulty rating, as there can be a lot of decision-making involved and keeping track of your assets, but it is also a lot of fun. With this deck, you'll harness the basic element water, and work your way up to unlock the advanced element terra, the element of nature and preservation. As for the playstyle, we mostly classify the deck as the control playstyle. Early on, you'll likely find yourself taking it slower, being reactive and defensive, and accruing value over time until you overtake your opponent. But there are also quite a few powerful allies in the deck that are able to deliver a beatdown. You'll find both non-combat and combat strategies at your disposal. Kongming is inspired by the historical figure and character Kongming, who is a brilliant military strategist who, in fiction, could manipulate the wind to aid his army. And so, similarly, our Kongming is a champion of the mage class, with an emphasis on casting spells that will lead your cause to the direction of victory. Let's start talking about cards in this deck. Here's the deck list if you'd like. There are some cards marked with an asterisk that are exclusive to the starter deck, meaning you won't find them in booster boxes. If you're curious about card type ratios, this deck features 35 spell type cards, 19 allies, 4 Fantasia Fractals, and 2 domains. Diving right into the material deck, we'll start with the most important part, your champion lineage. You'll begin the game as the level 0 Spirit of Water. Then, you'll level up into the level 1 Kongming Wayward Maven. She has, on enter, you gain the Shifting Currents Mastery. Players can only have one mastery. The Shifting Currents Mastery has 4 modes: North, South, East, and West. Some cards benefit from certain directions of Shifting Currents. Starts in the North direction. This is the first time that a mastery is being introduced in Grand Archive. It is a brand new mechanic. You will gain this card called Shifting Currents, which you'll be using for the rest of the game. It is a mastery card. You may notice this card has a big arrow on it and is intended for you to rotate to dictate which direction you're on. However, if you're worried about accidentally turning it to an ambiguous angle, you can also consider placing a die or counter on the edges of the card instead. Shifting Current says, Kongming bonus, meaning this effect only happens if your current champion is Kongming. At the beginning of your end phase, you may change the direction of your Shifting Currents to a different direction of your choice. Again, the directions are North, South, East, and West. You may want to take note that a mastery technically doesn't count as what the game considers an object on your field and cannot be interacted with through things like destroy target object. Currently, there is no way of interacting with your opponent's mastery. Now that you understand why Kongming spins with purpose, let's talk about her level 2, Kongming Aesthetic Vice. It has Kongming Lineage. It must be leveled up from a previous level Kongming champion. When it enters the field, on enter, Empower 3. And unfortunately, there is no reminder text here for what Empower does, but it means the next spell card you activate this turn activates and resolves as if your champion got +3 level. Gaining levels is pretty important in this deck. Finally, this card has this effect that stays active even after you leveled up to another champion card. Inherited effect. Whenever your Shifting Currents change from facing north to south, draw a card. This is a pretty powerful card draw engine, so unless you have other plans needing another direction, you'll probably want to end up at north as you wrap up your main phase. Then at your end phase, you can use your free direction change to go from north to south and draw. And the last card of your champion lineage is level 3 Kongming Fel Eidolon. This is a Terra element champion and will now allow you to start playing cards of the Terra advanced element. She has, on enter, Recover X, where X is the amount of Terra element cards in your banishment. To recover is basically to heal. You would remove that many damage counters from your champion. Then, whenever you activate a spell card, you may change the direction of your Shifting Currents to an adjacent direction of your choice. This means that if you're currently at north, you can change it to east or west, but not to south. This ability to frequently change directions is super important to Kongming's game plan. You want to use it to trigger as many advantages as possible. If there's one thing I hope you remember from this video, I kind of hope it's this. As you activate a spell card, the first thing you can do is change your direction. And then the actual effects on the spell card will resolve. This order matters a lot. As an example, this spell card deals 2 damage to all allies, but if you're at south, it does 3 damage instead. You do not need to already be at south before you play this card. It'll still work if you're at east or west. First, you'll play the spell, and then Kongming's ability sees that and triggers, allowing you to change your direction to south. And then the game looks at this card and sees that you're at south, so it will deal the 3 damage to your opponent's allies, all according to plan. Next are the other cards available in your material deck, the Regalia, aka your equipment. Returning from previous sets are these 3 cards. Life Essence Amulet, to draw a card if an ally dies on your opponent's turn. Bauble of Abundance can be banished for both players to draw a card. And Ring, to, for 1 turn, make your opponent put down 2 cards into their memory each time one of their units attack. Now for the new Regalia. Shard of Empowerment is an item that you can banish to gain Empower 2 for 1 turn, making your next spell work as if you gain 2 more levels. Fan of 7 Debts. When it enters the field, draw a card. Then Kongming bonus. You may banish it to change the direction of your shifting currents to a different direction of your choice. Sweet Ambrosia is a potion that you can banish to recover 3, in other words, remove 3 damage counters from your champion. And this one is really cool. Coronal of Rejuvenation is a Terra card, so you can only bring it out when you're level 3. It has a memory cost of 1, and also, as an additional cost to materialize this card, banish a Preserved card from your material deck. Preserve is a mechanic that allows you to put certain main deck cards into your material deck. And then when it's your materialize phase, you can choose to put a preserved card into your hand instead of materializing a Regalia or leveling up. Moving on, this card also has on enter, banish any amount of spell cards from your graveyard. Then, you can rest this card to play a card banished by Coronal of Rejuvenation. Activate this ability only at slow speed. Slow speed means that it has to be done during your own turn's main phase, while there are no other actions pending. This card lets you recycle cards already used and gives you a lot more options to choose from as you play your turn. You still do need to pay the cost to play these cards like normal though. And here's a huge thing to note. According to the current rules of the game per the developers, technically, both the card used to pay the 1 memory cost and the preserved card you banished count as cards banished by Coronal Rejuvenation. They are in the pool of cards that you can play. And this means that if you use those methods to banish something that's not a spell card, you can play that too. It's kind of crazy. And the last Regalia, Entrancing Filigree, has on enter, as a spell, banish target non-champion object you don't control. The as a spell part just means that this can't be used to target things that have Spell Shroud. This item also has on leave, return the banished object to the field under its owner's control, rested. To make this item leave the field, it would have to get destroyed or suppressed, etc. Now onto the main deck. First, let's go ahead and introduce all the allies making up your army. Ardent Cloud Striker has an expensive reserve cost of 5, but his stats are very impressive. If your shifting currents are at west and he's attacking a champion, this fellow can bonk you for 6 damage total. And with 4 life, he's kind of hard to remove from your field. On your front line, you'll find 2 defensive tanky allies in Formidable Yosha and Hydra Guard Retainer, who are both allies that usually want to stay awake. Formidable Yosha has Intercept, meaning whenever your champion is attacked while this ally is awake, you may redirect that attack to this ally. It gains some extra life when you're facing east. And Hydra Guard Retainer has Taunt, meaning that if this ally is awake and your opponent wants to attack someone on your field, they have to attack this guy first. Also, whenever your shifting currents change from facing north to west, draw a card. Oh boy, value, value, value. The next 2 allies both give you Empower, which again is a keyword that makes the next spell you activate that turn pretend as if you gained extra levels. Whenever Spirited Neophyte attacks and if you're facing north, Empower 2. Devoted Bloomweaver, when it enters the field, gives Empower 2. And it also has Preserve. When this ally dies, put it into its owner's material deck preserved. As you materialize, you may instead return a preserved card to your hand. It's like these cards never go away and can always be reused. And just a reminder that preserved cards, even though they're part of your material deck, are always face up. Your opponent does get to see them all. Okay, now let's take a look at all the various spells that will be driving your games, starting with your defensive spells. Water Barrier turns whatever damage you're taking into 1 damage instead, and it has floating memory, which is great as you can banish this from your graveyard to pay for the cost of your material deck cards instead of banishing cards from your memory. Coriolis Ward has prevent the next 1 plus level damage that would be dealt to target unit this turn. If you're facing west, draw a card into your memory. Reminder that if you see LV, that means your champion's level plus anything modifying it, such as Empower. It's pretty funny combining this card with your ally Hydroguard Retainer, who both care about facing west as they both offer tons of protection and card draw. Harmonious Mantra is a heal card for your champion. Recover 3. If you're facing north, recover 3 plus your level instead. Next, your offensive spells. Tsunami of Nanye we talked about earlier. If you're not facing south, it deals 2 damage to all rested allies, including your own. But if you are at south, it does 3 damage and only to your opponent's rested allies. It also has efficiency, meaning you get a discount off of its 5 reserve cost for every level you are. Empower could make this very cheap. Cone of Frost also works nicely with Empower. If your champion is level 1 or higher, deal 2 damage to target unit. Level 3 or higher, do it again. Level 5 or higher, do it a 3rd time. These 3 instances of damage can be dealt to different units or the same ones. Could be easy 6 damage, but this card can only be played at slow speed. Next is a Terra element spell called Leeching Bolt. This card we found fairly important to Kongming's late gameplay. Deal level damage to target unit, and recover 2 damage on your own champion. Then, if the card was empowered, it goes to your material deck preserved. This one card can deal a lot of damage, heals you, and you can reuse it again later. And even if not preserved, you can use the Regalia Coronal of Rejuvenation to bring it back from your graveyard anyway. It does so much to stabilize you while also blasting your opponent. And the last offensive spell there's only 1 copy of in the starter deck. Planar Abyss costs 12, but with efficiency it's 1 less cost per each level you are. At the beginning of your next Recollection phase, that being your next turn, destroy all non-champion objects, and if your shifting currents face south, deal 10 damage to each champion you don't control. It's a big reset button. Non-champion objects are going to include everything on the field, including allies, items, domains, fantasias, weapons, etc. And the final category of spells, which are your engine spells. They make sure you have the resources for your strategy. These 3 cards have floating memory, giving them double the value. Firstly, the classic, ever-present Idle Thoughts. Use it to fix the order of the top 4 cards of your deck. Rising Tides. If you're level 3 or higher, draw a card into your memory. This card is so good for helping you go up on influence, and it's great that it works at fast speed. And if your champion isn't actually at level 3 yet, consider using Heightened Spellcraft, which gives Empower 3. Now for cycle cards that let you draw a card. Wisdom's Reprise draws into memory, but first you'll glimpse 3. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put them back in whatever order on the top and or bottom of the deck. Helps you find what you need. And Terrasite draws a card, then you can preserve Terrasite back to your material deck to recycle endlessly. So that's everything in your spellbook. Not falling under the categories of allies or spells are these 2 cards. Taiji of Crystal Stratagems is a Fantasia Fractal. It's an object that will stay on your field. It has reservable, making it kind of like a perpetual resource. While paying for a reserve cost, usually this means putting cards down into your memory to pay for the yellow cost on cards. You may rest this object to pay for 1 of that cost. However, it does have another ability that you may want to save and rest it for instead though. Whenever your shifting currents change from facing south to east, while Taiji of Crystal Stratagems is awake, you may rest it. When you do, as a spell, deal 3 damage to target champion you don't control. If you have multiple of these on the field, they can all fire at your opponent. The final card in this deck is Ruinous Pillars of Qidao, which is a domain-type card. This also stays on your field. On enter, Empower 2. Draw a card. Whenever your shifting currents change from facing west to east, sacrifice Ruinous Pillars of Qidao. When you do, destroy target non-champion object you don't control. Again, most things that are on the field are considered objects. And that's all the cards. Here is an example play sequence just so we can see some of the cards in action. I go first, I bring out Spirit of Water and draw 7 cards. A pretty good opening play is to throw down Taiji of Crystal Stratagems since it's a resource that will stay on your board. I'll pay for it by putting down Terra cards so that those will end up in my banishment, which is relevant for Kongming level 3 later. Next turn, let's go to Kongming level 1 Wayward Maven by banishing 1 Terra card. I'll now receive the Shifting Currents Mastery. It starts at the north direction. We'll put down a Hydra Guard retainer for protection, paying 1 of the reserve cost by resting the Taiji, which has reservable. Hydra Guard is a tanky guy with taunt and will draw us a card if we go from north to west. Like I mentioned earlier, this has a sweet synergy with Coriolis Ward, which thankfully I have in my hand. That card also cares about being west and can be used to protect my Hydra Guard. At my end phase, I can change my Shifting Currents direction. I'll go from north to west and draw that card from Hydra Guard. Now I'm set up when my opponent attacks my Hydra Guard. I protect him, and since I'm pointing west, Coriolis Ward also draws a card into my memory. Next turn, I'm going to take things easy and just accrue resources. I'll materialize Shard of Empowerment for later. I'm not going to play anything this turn and wait till the end of my opponent's turn to throw down some fast speed cards. End of my turn, I'll go back to north to set up for next turn. At the end of my opponent's turn, let's get some value and set up for leveling. I'll play these fast cards both with Floating Memory. Heightened Spellcraft, which empowers 3, turning on Rising Tides, level 3+ effect to draw a card into my memory. Now we'll banish both Floating Memory to go to level 2 Kongming Ascetic Vice. From now on, whenever I go from north to south, I'll draw a card. On enter, she gives Empower 3, so I'll use those extra levels for a fully powered up Cone Frost, dealing 6 damage total to my opponent's units. I'll also use Idle Thoughts to set up to go to level 3 next turn. I see Terrasite, so I'm definitely grabbing that ASAP. At my end step, let's get my north to south card draw. The next turn, I'll banish 3 things to go to level 3 Kongming Fel Eidolon. Yippee, banishing 2 more Terra cards. On enter, recover 3 for the 3 Terra cards in my banishment. Now it's time to spin to win. Every spell I play lets me turn my currents 90 degrees. Before my recollection phase, I'll do some fast actions. Terrasite is an easy play. The spell activation triggers Kongming's ability that allows me to shift my currents. Let's go from south to east to trigger our Taiji of Crystal stratagem and ping 3 damage at the opponent. Terrasite then draws me a card and it gets preserved to my material deck for future use. Still pre-recollection, I can also play Wisdom's Reprise. First thing, spell trigger, I'll spin from east to north. Then we'll glimpse the top 3 cards of our deck. Yay, I found a Leeching Bolt, so bring that to the top. Then draw a card into my memory. Now recollection phase, pick those cards back up into my hand. We'll hold up cards to play on the opponent's turn. End of turn, go from north to south, draw a card for that. On my opponent's turn, their big scary ally attacks me, so I think I'll Leeching Bolt it to death. We'll finally crack that Shard of Empowerment to get Empowered 2. Leeching Bolt spell activation, spin to east. Leeching Bolt deals 6 damage, exactly enough to kill the Bloodbond's Blade Sworn. The Bloodbond Blade... I actually can't say this name. Anyway, I recover 2. Then because Leeching Bolt was empowered, it gets preserved into my material deck to use again later. End of my opponent's turn, I think I'll play Rising Tides again. Spin back to north, draw a card into memory, and put Floating Memory into my graveyard. On my turn, I'll use that Floating Memory to materialize Coronal of Rejuvenation. And also another part of its cost is banishing a preserved card, so we'll use the Terrasite for that. Now with this Regalia, we'll banish all the spell cards in my graveyard. All of those and the 2 cards used to pay the costs of Coronal, I can play again during my main phase. We'll do just that. Rest Coronal to activate the Terrasite, and it's like drawing an extra card for free. On spell activation, I turn east. This time, we'll play Tsunami of Nanyue to deal with the opponent's field of allies. On spell activation, I turn from east to south. Now Tsunami sees that I'm at south and will deal 3 damage to all of my opponent's allies. I'll also play another Terrasite. Spell activation, spin from south to east. Oh, look at that! Taiji of Crystal Stratagem pings for 3. Terrasite draws me a card and it gets preserved. Lastly, I'll heal up a bit with Harmonious Mantra, spinning from east to north, which is what this card wants. Now it will recover 3 plus my level for a total of 6. End of my turn, spin from north to south, draw a card, woohoo! And that's how the cards work in action. We're gonna end the play sequence here. Before we wrap up this video, let's talk about a few options of cards you can consider swapping into this deck. I'm only going to mention stuff that doesn't actually change the identity or playstyle of the starter deck much. Starting with some basic staples, though they may not be the cheapest, you'll probably want to swap in one of the Divine Relics into your material deck. You can only play one Regalia with the keyword Divine Relic, so choose your favorite. And of course, there's the classic Dungeon Guide, in order to help you level up quicker and cheaper, getting you to Kongming level 3 Fel Eidolon so you can unlock changing directions with every spell. Looking at Regalia, a really nice upgrade is the item Ebbing Tide. It has Hindered, so the turn you bring it out, it will be rested. Then it has abilities that can be activated at fast speed, where you rest it in order to get Empower, potentially for a lot. The one downside to this card is that its rarity is UR, ultra rare, so may not be the easiest to obtain a copy of. On the flip side, here are 2 cards of the common rarity that may be helpful in the main deck. Mnemonic Charm is an item that has, on enter, draw a card into your memory. Then you can choose to sacrifice it at any time to Empower 2. Retold Fortune lets you discard up to 1 spell card. If you do, draw a card. And it has Floating Memory. Discard means to put a card from your hand into the graveyard. Do note though that Retold Fortune itself is a skill and not a spell, so wouldn't trigger the level 3 spinning. You can use this card to clean up your hand or dig for certain cards you want. You can discard a spell with Floating Memory for extra value. And just know, you can always use Coronal Rejuvenation to get any discarded cards back later anyway. Another card we liked was Spell Shield Terra. The next time damage would be dealt to your champion this turn, prevent that damage. Reveal an amount of cards from the top of your deck equal to the amount of damage prevented this way, and put them into your material deck preserved. With this, you not only can protect your champion, it also can preserve a ton of cards. Now on your materialized phase, you basically have a buffet of cards you can choose from to add to your hand. That's all, thank you for watching. Shout out to Fome and Andrew for playtesting with me and all their help. If you want to learn about the other Mortal Ambition starter deck with the Warrior Champion Jin, I would definitely recommend heading to Maindeck's channel. Maindeck Dan will teach you the ways of immortality. Like, literally, actually. One last thing, these starter decks do come with the possibility of opening a CSR, Collector Signature Rare, version of the level 3 champion cards. So I wish you all the best of luck with your polls, and happy spinning!
What's the dance again? It's like... Hey, what's up guys? It's your girl, Kongming! That was more painful to do than I expected.